In 2004, a little over 3 million people bought their first home. Fast forward to 2024, and just over 1 million first-time home buyers entered the marketplace. That's the lowest number in nearly 40 years. The American dream isn't just fading, it's collapsing. And in today's video, I'm gonna cover why, how we got here from the inception of the American dream in 1947 at Levittown to the lowest number of first-time buyers in nearly 40 years in 2025, tell you what you can do about it and how you can still claim your piece of the American dream. So stick around to the end for that. Let's get stuck right into it. So as I said, between 2004 and 2024, we went from 3 million first-time homebuyers to 1 million first-time homebuyers. That is a massive decline. But as I said, the scariest part of it is it wasn't a slow, steady decline. We had a slow, steady decline from 2004 until 2021, when we went from 3 million first-time homebuyers to 2 million first-time homebuyers. But from 2021 to 2024, in just 3 years, we lost the other million and went from 2 million down to 1 million. Now that is a rapid collapse due to a lot of changing market forces. So let's start with the first bit, from 2004 to 2021. What factors were affecting the amount of first-time homebuyers over that 17-year period? And how do we lose over 1 million of them in that 17 years? So during this period, it really comes down to 4 factors that affected the amount of first-time homebuyers coming to the market. The first was wage stagnation. In that period, from 2004 to 2021, coming out of the Great Recession, we had a lot of wage stagnation in the country. And as it always does, that wage stagnation greatly affects the bottom tier of income earners. So for your working class Americans, they've seen at this point nearly 50 years of wage stagnation at the bottom of the earnings pyramid. And that greatly affects the amount of people who can afford to achieve the American dream. Now, that is exacerbated by the second reason, which is rising prices. Of course, we had a massive price correction during the Great Recession, losing 40 to 60% in home equity in a lot of places in the country. But coming out of the Great Recession, we had a lot of appreciation and a lot of rising home prices in the country. And of course, just in the year from 2020 to 2021, we saw incredible appreciation due to the crazy COVID housing market. So we had wage stagnation and rising prices. That right there is going to cut a lot of people out of the American dream of homeownership. In this same period, we had ballooning college debt. So many Americans were coming out of college saddled with a lot of student loans. And those student loan debt service payments meant that they qualified for less mortgages or qualified for no mortgages. They didn't qualify at all. Or even if they did qualify, they didn't feel like they had the freeboard to afford their student loans and a mortgage, and they got frozen out of the housing market. Now, of course, the fourth and final reason that contributed to losing 1 million first-time homebuyers between 2004 and 2021 is the tightening of lending standards. Of course, in the 2000 to 2005 run-up to the eventual 2008, 2009, depending on how you slice it, major collapse of the Great Recession, we had loosey-goosey lending standards. It was insane. You just had to tell them what you made and they believed you. And you could get crazy loans that didn't even pay down the principal at all. In fact, you could get a loan called a negative amortization loan where you owed more on your home month after month. Their lending standards were essentially non-existent. Now, coming out of that period, that latter half from say 2010, 2011 up to 2021, we had a tightening of lending standards, getting back to traditional lending criteria to make sure that people were taking on reasonable amounts of debt, reasonable mortgage payments, and had reasonable skin in the game in terms of having actually had to spend some money out of pocket to purchase their own home. So that really contracted the number of people who could buy a home as well, because we simply weren't giving everybody off the street a mortgage if they said they made $1 million a year. So that covers 2004 to 2021. We had wage stagnation, we had rising prices, we had ballooning student loan debt, and we had tightening of lending standards, which contracted that buyer pool by 1 million over 17 years. But let's look at the next phase. How did we lose another million in just 3 years between 2021 and 2024. Well, this, of course, is going to come down to massive price appreciation. Due to the extreme inventory shortage during the COVID-19 pandemic, prices skyrocketed, and that froze more and more Americans out of home ownership. That only started to ease after mortgage rates doubled in July of 2022. And now the home price appreciation stopped flying up like an out of control rocket, but people couldn't afford mortgages now because we had 7 and 8% interest rates. So between inventory shortages, massive price appreciation, and a doubling of the interest rates, we lost another 1 million buyers out of the first-time buyer pool in just 3 years. Like I said, that's not a slow decline, that's an absolute and utter collapse. And it leaves the vast majority of Americans frozen out of the American dream for now. So before we jump into how you can get your slice of the American dream and who the American dream is accessible for now and what you can do to try to claw your way back into homeownership if you've been one of the many Americans that have been frozen out, it's important to take a minute to look at how we got here, what our expectations are, and how this whole thing started. So if you'll permit me just a few minutes of your time for a brief history lesson, the American dream, this idea of owning your own home, getting married, having 2 kids, a dog, a washing machine, and a brand new Chevy truck in the driveway, this all started in a post-World War II America. Specifically, we can point to Levittown in 1947, one of the first tract home subdivisions in the country that was offering low-cost homes delivered quickly at a price that almost every American could afford. Now remember, during World War II, all the men were off in Europe fighting and the women entered the workforce. When all the men came back, we had a ton of reasonably cheap labor coming into the workforce, and American manufacturing was soaring because of all the manufacturing that we ramped up during the war. And now we didn't need to make planes and tanks and missiles and bullets anymore, so we could direct all of that manufacturing knowledge and square footage and man and woman power into building low-cost goods. Everybody could afford a new washing machine and a radio. Everybody could afford a new car. And most people, especially with the aid of the GI Bill, could afford a new house. But expectations were wildly different in 1947 than they are today. The average size of a home in Levittown was 750 square feet, and the average bedroom and bathroom count was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That is wildly different than today, where the average home is 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 to 3 baths, and over 2,400 square feet. So the expectations are wildly different. Now look, this isn't an attempt at some ham-handed, hand-waving away the challenges of modern day homeownership and the lack of affordability due to high prices. Those are all totally real. But when we talk about how to claw back a small piece of the American dream for average working day Americans, it's important to address these expectations and say that it might be time to readjust those expectations due to the out of control prices in the country. So I'm not saying you should go out and buy a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 750 square foot home for your family. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't want a larger, better home for your family. But as of now, the market mechanics that we're facing are looking towards not massive price drops by the end of this year, and maybe not by the end of next year. I'm recording this, for those of you who might be watching in the future, in the summer of 2025. And my expectation is that we will continue to see downward price pressure for the rest of this year, but not massive price drops. And I think we will continue to see downward price pressure for 2026, but it's gonna be slow and incremental. It's simply not gonna be fast enough for the average American to see enough price relief for us to expand home ownership to the amount of people that really need or want it. So in the meantime, if you don't want to wait until 2027 or beyond, part of what will make the American dream more accessible is realigning expectations and shooting for smaller, more reasonable homes and planning to play Monopoly and climb the property ladder as you go along. Now look, nobody really wants to do this. We all want to go out and buy our dream home and the one that will fit our family forever and not have to do this thing twice. Believe me, I've been selling homes for over 20 years now, and it's horrible to try to buy a home. It's horrible to try to sell a home. and it disrupts your life, and nobody really wants to do it more than one time if they don't have to. But the realities of this market simply mean that it is time to consider buying a lesser quality home and a smaller home, doing some fix up, doing some riding up of the market, and then buying up as you go along to try to get homeownership in the hands of more Americans. Now, there are other things you can do too, and we're gonna jump into those right now. Before we do, I wanted to take a quick second to just ask you, if you're getting anything at all out of this video, to hit the like button, click subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss another video with crucial information to help you make your home ownership dreams a reality. Now, back to our discussion of how to claw back a little bit of that American dream for most Americans. All right, in addition to realigning your perspectives and maybe going for a smaller, more modest home that needs a little bit of work, there's some other things you can do to try to make home ownership a reality. And the first one of those is to go further afield. If you're looking in the city center, in the most desirable or closest to the job center of your town or city, then those homes are going to be more expensive. And if you're willing to take on a little bit more commute, there are going to be better deals on offer. So if you're willing to go a little further out, go a little more remote, maybe a little more rural, you can get more home for your money, and you might be able to get into the American dream sooner. And that is a reasonable thing to do if you expect house prices to continue to go up in your area, because as home prices go up, people continue to move further afield. And as they do, those homes that are just on the outside start to go up in value. And you can see some pretty big jumps if you're buying homes that are just 1 or 2 bumps outside of the city center. It's a reasonable strategy to look at as we move forward here. You're going to get some relief of price declines by the end of 2025. You're going to get some relief of lower interest rates by the end of 2025. And maybe just going that little bit extra commute time might make home ownership possible for you. Look, right about now, if you're still with me and watching this video, you're probably wondering who I am and why you should be listening to me about real estate, history, or anything at all, really, and it's a pretty fair question. My name is Rich Curtis. I've been selling homes here in the greater Sacramento and greater El Dorado County areas for over 20 years now, in markets ranging from the Great Recession that we were talking about to the COVID market insanity and everything in between. So when it comes to Northern California real estate, I've got you covered. My goal with this channel is to help you make the highest quality real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. And to that end, I'm going to continue with my discussion of some ways you can try to make homeownership more affordable now so you can get in sooner and ride some of that appreciation and get your piece of the wealth building that's on offer through home ownership. The next way you can start to try to make home ownership more affordable is by leveraging down payment assistance programs. Now look, a full deep dive into down payment assistance programs is too much for this video. It would go too long and you all would click off already. However, I do have an episode of my Informed Homebuyer podcast, and there's a playlist for that on my channel that does do a deep dive into all the down payment assistance programs so you can see if one of them might work for you. So with these down payment assistance programs, some of them you do have to pay back, some of them are outright grants, but they allow people who are working hard and saving up for homeownership to sometimes get into the market that little bit sooner. Now, why does it matter to get into the market that little bit sooner? Well, it matters because the longer you're in the market, the more of the appreciation you get to ride up as we go. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, you told me there's going to be price drops through this year and the end of next year. So why do I want a piece of price drops? And you don't. Nobody does. And that's why your timeline is really, really important here. If you watch any of our podcast episodes or videos here, you'll know that we're encouraging people not to be using interest rates, fear of missing out, or even home prices as their decision-making matrix for when to get into the market right now. It's more important that you focus on the fundamentals of home ownership. Do you have an emergency fund? Can you make this payment at this interest rate no matter what if the rates don't come down or you can't refi when they do? Do you have a long time horizon? Are you going to hold this home for 5 years or more? I just told you I expect price declines in the next year to 2 years minimum. So if you're not going to hold it for 5 years or more, you're not going to have any appreciation really to speak of. This is one of the most important ones. You should be looking at your home purchase right now to make it for the next 5 minimum 10 years better if you want to really get the wealth building advantages of owning real estate. Number 4, are you the type of buyer that has stable employment? Right now, a lot of people are really afraid of losing their jobs. And if you think there are real threats to your industry, or you're already seeing job loss or layoffs in your industry, then it might not be the right time for you. So everything I'm saying in this video about trying to grab your piece of home ownership sooner only matters if you meet those 5 fundamentals. If you don't, you want to re-rack, step back, and build up that emergency fund. Make sure you have stable employment. Make sure you've got your down payment and closing costs locked in. Make sure you're comfortable with the payment at today's interest rates and beyond before you attempt to jump in. But if you've got all that nailed down, these techniques are ways you can get in a little sooner, and down payment assistance programs are a great one. I've got 2 more strategies for you, and the last one I think is the best one, so make sure you stick around for that. But this one is assumable loans. Look for assumable loans. I'm seeing a lot more advertisements on the MLS for properties that have an assumable loan. So that means that they might have one of those pandemic era interest rate loans of 2 to 3.5%, and you may be able to assume that loan. Now there's lots of criteria that go into this. It's too much to go into for this video. It doesn't always work, but if you meet the qualifications to assume the loan and you're taking out the same amount of debt, you have enough down payment to make that work, you can potentially assume the owner's loan and lock in those 2 to 3% interest rates. Now all of a sudden things just got a lot more affordable. These were a needle in a haystack, but literally prepping a tour for a client just yesterday, I came across 3 homes listing assumable loans as a benefit to purchasing their home. So they are out there, you can do it, and it can be the unlock for buyers that have been frozen out due to the affordability crunch of high prices and high interest rates. All right, before we jump into the final way you might be able to achieve the American dream of homeownership a little bit early, I wanted to say that if by the end of this video, your head's still spinning, you really don't know how to make sense of this or what would be the best move for you, feel free to reach out to me via the contact information on your screen or in the description down below. Like I said, I've been selling homes for over 20 years now. I've helped hundreds of families just like yours, and I'm always happy to help. And look, there's no blanket advice in real estate that's good advice. Real estate is hyper local and hyper personal. So if you're not getting the right decision-making matrix for you from this video, reach out to me. We can go over your personal situation and your area and give you a tailor-made plan and recommendations just for you. And that's the best kind of advice to get in real estate. All right, the last way you might be able to achieve the American dream early and have a lot of flexibility and benefits, and I think this really is the best one on the list, my favorite, in fact, and one my own family is going to have to look into very soon, is co-borrowing or multi-generational living. Look, we are in the sandwich generation if you're my age, right? We are the people who are going to have kids in college and parents who are dying at the same time. And it's really expensive to be running 2 households and putting kids through college. And the solution for a lot of us is to have a multi-generational property, 2 homes on 1 lot where we can move our aging parents onto the property and take care of them while we're also putting kids through college. This also brings another set of borrowers and another set of funds and more wealth in from another generation. The baby boomer generation has been hogging up a bulk of the wealth here in the country for a long time. And this is a way for them to share that wealth with their kids, buy a multi-generational property, make home ownership available to you now when they can still afford to do it. And then as they age, you are right there on the property to help take care of them. I think this is a great solution. This is how we always did it in America in the past. This is how most other countries do it. And it's something that we really need to start looking into, both for our families, our long-term wealth building, and for achieving that American dream of home ownership for these generations for whom it has frankly gotten a little bit or a lot out of reach. Now look, when it comes to all of this, you may be wondering why? Why do I even want to participate in the American dream anymore? Why should I buy a house? Why does all this matter? It's too expensive. The interest rates are too high. I'm frozen out. I'm going to rent and I'm going to throw that money in the stock market, or I'm going to go YOLO and fly off to Greece and party on an island somewhere, and who cares? And I think, to be fair, a lot of people, especially in the younger generations, are feeling that way, and it's a valid feeling. And I think it's true that homeownership isn't right for everybody. It's not right for every location. If you live in New York City, it very well may be the case that it makes sense to rent for the rest of your life and divert the extra money you would have spent on a mortgage into the stock market and secure yourself a retirement. Or go ahead and go YOLO and have fun, party in Greece. That choice is yours. But it is hyper local, like I said, real estate is. And so you want to run a rent versus own calculation before you even decide to try to take any of this advice and jump in. So jump on the internet, find a good rent versus own calculator, put in the numbers for your area. If you don't really know the numbers, you're having trouble with that, reach out to me. I can help you with that. But you want to do this calculation for yourself before trying any of these strategies and make sure it makes sense in your city to own versus rent. The other reasons, though, that I think home ownership and the American dream is worth pursuing, even in the face of all of these unprecedented obstacles, is one, it's the number one wealth building tool for the middle class. Homes have funded more retirements and funded more college educations for more families than nearly any other asset class because of its forced savings account and appreciation dual benefits. So I think this is still a really good thing to pursue. But more than that, I'm a little bit older now. I have 2 kids. I have aging parents. I'm in fact about to sell my parents' home, the home I grew up in. And what I've learned is that my industry has done a disservice by promoting just the wealth building aspects of home ownership. Is it great? Yes, but it's only been great the last 20 to 30 years historically. Before that, your home, for the most part, just kept pace or slightly outpaced inflation. Last 20 to 30 years has been bananas in terms of home appreciation, and so it has been a really great wealth building tool. But before that, when it was just keeping pace from inflation, there was a 100% ironclad argument to be made to sink your money into the stock market, not into a home. But still, massive amounts of Americans were buying homes, even when they were not your largest wealth building tool. Why? Because it's the hub of your life. Because it gives you a hedge against inflation. You lock in your housing costs with a 30-year mortgage and they don't go up on you like rents do. Because it gives you a chunk of this earth and this country that you own just for you and just for your family. And it gives you that security to start a family and raise that family and feel like you have your own place in the world, and that is priceless. When it comes to my home, which I'm sitting in right now, my studio is in a portion of my home. I can tell you where I was standing when my wife yelled out to me and told me that we were pregnant with our first child. I can tell you where I was standing when she called out to me and told me that the pregnancy test said we were pregnant with our second child. I can show you the spot where my son took his first steps, where my daughter took her first steps. I can show you the spot where my son learned to ride his bike on our property. I can tell you where I was standing when I got the calls that said my parents were in the hospital that eventually led to, unfortunately, them passing away. I can tell you where I was standing when the doctor called and said I might have cancer, and I can definitely tell you where I was standing when I got the call with the test results that said, thank God I didn't have cancer. All of these things, all of these ups and downs, these moments that define our lives happen within the wrapper and the confines of our home. And there is a stability of being able to stay in that one place for all of those moments of life that doesn't have a price tag, that doesn't have a wealth building, price appreciation, market forces reasoning behind it. It is irrational, it is emotional, but it is the hub of our lives. Our homes are more than just a wealth building vehicle. And so despite all of the headwinds, and I know there are a lot, and I know a lot of you are hurting right now financially, and this might not be your moment. This might be your moment to prepare to get to your moment. I still deeply believe that home ownership is a vital part of the fabric of our country. I still deeply believe in the American dream. I believe it's on offer for us now, and I am committed to helping the most number of you achieve that I possibly can while I'm still working in this industry. I hope this video helped. I hope it gave you some perspective and some tips and tricks and tools to try to get your piece of that American dream if you haven't yet. If you want more of that, click this playlist right here for our Informed Home Buyer podcast, where you can get a lot more deep dives into ways that you can make homeownership affordable. If you're wondering what's going on in the market, you can click this video here for our July perfect storm video telling you what we think is going to happen this month in July. And if you're wondering what's going on in the market, why the news is telling you that the market's dropping like a stone, and you go on realtor.com, you still can't afford any houses and the prices just aren't coming down as quick as you thought, you can click this video right here on the delisting trend and why we're not seeing the price drops we had hoped or expected to see by now. Either way, if you've made it this far with me, thanks for watching, thanks for being here, and I'll see you on the next one.